There's something hauntingly beautiful about the way history leaves its fingerprints on the present, tiny, almost invisible traces of rituals that once bound communities together. Rituals now buried under centuries of dust and forgetting. Picture this: you're standing in the quiet glow of dawn, surrounded by the crumbling stones of an ancient temple. The air hums with a quiet energy, as if the whispers of those who once gathered here still linger, waiting to be heard. These aren't just echoes of the past, they're fragments of a story that shaped who we are today. And yet, so many of these rituals have slipped through the cracks of history, overshadowed by grand monuments and famous battles. But what if I told you that these overlooked practices, the sacred dances, the cryptic burial rites, the whispered incantations, hold the keys to understanding our ancestors' deepest fears, hopes, and dreams? Today, we're stepping off the beaten path to uncover 40 of these hidden rituals, each one a thread in the vast tapestry of our ancient heritage. Some were performed under the light of a full moon, others in the depths of hidden caves, but all of them served a purpose far greater than we might imagine. They weren't just ceremonies, they were lifelines, ways to make sense of a world filled with mystery and danger. Think about it. How did a simple act like lighting a fire or offering a handful of grain become a bridge between the living and the divine? How did these rituals forge bonds so strong that their echoes still resonate in our traditions today? The answers lie in the details: the careful placement of a stone, the precise timing of a chant, the unbroken chain of hands passing down knowledge from one generation to the next. This isn't just a journey into the past, it's a chance to see history with fresh eyes, to recognize the invisible threads that connect us to those who came before. By the time we're done, you'll never look at an old tradition the same way again, because these rituals, they're more than just curiosities. They're proof of humanity's endless creativity, our stubborn hope, and our unshakable need to find meaning in the world around us. So let's begin. Let's walk through the forgotten doorways of time and discover the 40 overlooked rituals that define our ancient heritage and, in ways we might not even realize, still define us. The sacred fire ceremonies of the Zoroastrians offer us a glimpse into a world where flame was far more than just a tool. It was a living bridge between earth and the divine. Imagine standing in one of their ancient temples, the air thick with the scent of sandalwood and myrrh, as priests draped in white robes circled an eternal flame, their voices rising in hypnotic chants. This wasn't mere ritual, it was a conversation with the cosmos. For the Zoroastrians, fire represented the very essence of Ahura Mazda, their god of wisdom and light. They believed that by tending these flames, they were nurturing the order of the universe itself. Every flicker carried prayers upward, every ember held the promise of purification. What's fascinating is how these ceremonies wove together the practical and the mystical. The fire wasn't just worshipped, it was listened to. Priests trained for years to interpret the dance of the flames, reading their movements like a language. A sudden flare might signal divine favor, while a wavering light could warn of unseen dangers. And the offerings, they weren't just symbolic. Bundles of fragrant wood, drops of precious oils, each gift was chosen to sustain the fire's purity, a physical act that mirrored their spiritual devotion. Even today, in the remote mountain temples of Yazd, you can witness echoes of this ancient tradition. The flames still burn, tended by a dwindling line of priests who keep alive a practice that stretches back over 3,000 years. It's a powerful reminder of how deeply humanity has always sought to connect with forces greater than ourselves. Fire, one of the most basic elements, became a sacred messenger, a testament to the human instinct to find meaning in the natural world. And perhaps that's the true legacy of these ceremonies, not just the rituals themselves, but the enduring idea that even the simplest acts can become profound when infused with reverence. But the Zoroastrians weren't alone in their veneration of fire. Across cultures, from the Vedic altars of India to the hearths of ancient Greece, flames have symbolized both creation and destruction, warmth and wrath. What sets the Zoroastrian tradition apart is its unbroken thread, a continuity that lets us touch, even now, the heartbeat of a civilization that saw the divine in light itself. Deep in the heart of China's Shang dynasty, a king's most pressing questions weren't answered by advisors or battle plans. They were etched onto the polished shoulder blades of oxen and the flat undersides of turtle shells. These oracle bones, as we now call them, became the hotline to the spirit world, where cracks in heated bone revealed the will of gods and ancestors. Picture the scene, a royal diviner kneeling in smoky torchlight, carefully carving characters into bone with a bronze blade. Will the harvest be plentiful? Should we march against our northern enemies? Before applying a red-hot poker to the surface, the sharp snap of the bone splitting wasn't just sound, it was the universe speaking. What makes these rituals so extraordinary is how they blended bureaucracy with mysticism. Priests didn't just read random cracks, they developed an entire system of interpretation, recording both questions and outcomes with meticulous precision. Some bones even bear follow-up inscriptions like "The rain did come on the third day," proving they tracked their divinations like cosmic accounting. This wasn't superstition, it was an early form of data science where patterns in fractures were studied as carefully as modern meteorologists read weather models. And the writing itself, those angular characters scratched into bone, are the direct ancestors of modern Chinese script. We're literally seeing language being born, not in poetry or laws, but in questions to invisible forces. When a diviner wrote, "Will the queen's childbirth go well?" he wasn't just seeking answers, he was preserving a moment of human vulnerability across 3,000 years. Though the practice faded after the Shang, its legacy smolders in unexpected places. The I Ching's hexagrams echo the binary yes/no nature of bone cracking, and even today's fortune cookies play with the same idea of edible prophecy. But perhaps the most haunting connection is how these bones remind us that our ancestors faced the same uncertainties we do. They just held their questions up to the light in different ways. Next time you hesitate before making a big decision, remember, we've always sought signs in the world around us, whether in stars, tea leaves, or the sacred fractures of a turtle's shell. High in the arid cliffs of pre-Incan Peru, the Paracas culture performed a ritual so intimate with death it feels almost alive today. Their nobles weren't just buried, they were transformed into sacred bundles, swaddled in layers of textiles so vibrant they still blaze with color after 2,000 years. Picture these mummies crouched in fetal positions, wrapped in cloth painted with grinning gods and spiraling serpents, then lowered into collective tombs where generations rested side by side. This wasn't mere preservation, it was a rebellion against oblivion. The magic lies in the details. Each thread in those shrouds was spun from vicuña wool or cotton, dyed with pigments from desert plants and crushed minerals, colors so potent they outlasted empires. But these weren't just pretty coverings. The patterns formed a visual language, their zigzags and step motifs mapping the Paracas' vision of the cosmos. A single bundle might tell of creation myths, clan lineages, even instructions for the afterlife, all woven into fabric like a textile library, and the bodies inside. They were prepared with almost surgical precision, organs removed through incisions, skin treated with resins, head sometimes reshaped in childhood to signify status, every step a meditation on the boundary between decay and eternity. What's haunting is how these bundles served the living as much as the dead. Families would revisit tombs, unwrapping ancestors to add new layers or consult them in times of crisis. Imagine lifting a centuries-old textile to reveal your great-grandfather's face, still recognizable, still part of the community. This was ancestor worship made tangible, a physical thread connecting past and present. Modern archaeologists still puzzle over these bundles. Some contain surprises, like traces of hallucinogens suggesting the dead were fed visions for their journey. Others reveal tragedies. One child's mummy wears a tiny gold mask, a grieving parent's final gift. But perhaps the most profound lesson is how the Paracas refused to let death sever relationships. Their mummies weren't relics, they were teachers, guardians, family. In a world obsessed with moving forward, these quiet bundles remind us that sometimes progress means knowing what to carry with you. Now let's shift from the silence of tombs to a ritual where sound itself was medicine. Among the ancient Tuvan shamans of Siberia, the haunting drone of the didgeridoo isn't just music, it's a living current of energy, one that Aboriginal healers have harnessed for millennia to mend both body and soul. Picture a healer sitting cross-legged in the red dust of the outback at dusk, his lips vibrating against the termite, hollowed eucalyptus trunk as sound waves ripple through the air like visible force. This isn't performance, it's ancient medicine. The Yolngu people believed the didgeridoo's frequencies could realign a person's spirit, its vibrations physically massaging internal organs while driving away malevolent forces. What's extraordinary is how precisely these traditions understood sound therapy long before modern science caught up. Elders taught that specific rhythms and pitches corresponded to different ailments, a steady, pulsing beat for joint pain, spiraling overtones for mental distress. Recent studies at the University of Melbourne reveal something astonishing. Playing the didgeridoo for just 30 minutes can reduce sleep apnea symptoms by strengthening throat muscles, while its resonant frequencies measurably lower stress hormones. Science now confirms what oral traditions preserved for 40,000 years, that this instrument doesn't just make sound, it changes us. The true magic lies in how the ritual intertwined healing with cosmology. Healers often played at sacred waterholes where the sound would bounce off rock walls, creating cascading echoes said to summon ancestor spirits. The circular breathing technique, inhaling through the nose while exhaling through the mouth to sustain endless notes, mirrored the Aboriginal concept of eternal time. Even the making of the instrument was sacred. Only certain trees selected by elders could be used, their hollow cores formed naturally by termites in a process called songlines in waiting. Despite brutal colonial attempts to erase these practices, the didgeridoo's voice never faded. Today, young indigenous musicians blend ancient techniques with modern styles, ensuring the healing continues. When you hear that deep, earthy hum, you're not just listening to an instrument, you're hearing the resilient heartbeat of the world's oldest living culture. Now let's explore a different kind of transformation, one carved from wood and painted with spirit. Among the Pacific Northwest's Quackwa-Kawa people, masks weren't disguises. A hush falls over the audience as the Noh actor steps into the pool of lantern light, his face hidden behind a mask carved from cypress, wood so thin it seems to breathe. In medieval Japan, this moment wasn't just theater, it was a sacred transformation. The mask, painted with crushed oyster shell pigments and sealed with layers of lacquer, didn't merely represent a god or warrior, it became them. Carvers often fasted before sculpting these masks, believing their chisels guided by the spirits themselves. When an actor tied the silk cords behind his head, tradition held that the boundary between performer and deity dissolved entirely. Watch closely during a Noh performance, and you'll notice something uncanny. The mask's expression appears to shift with the angle of the actor's head. A downward tilt might make a goddess seem sorrowful. A slight lift could reveal her divine wrath. This illusion, called Hayatoko, wasn't stage trickery but spiritual alchemy. Performers trained for decades to master the subtle movements that brought these wooden faces to life, their slow, gliding steps syncing with the eerie wail of bamboo flutes and the sporadic thunder of taiko drums. The result, audiences often reported visions, as if the masks had opened a doorway to another world. What's remarkable is how these rituals persist unchanged. Modern Noh actors still use masks carved centuries ago, their surfaces worn smooth by generations of hands. The oldest surviving mask, housed in a Kyoto temple, dates back to the 14th century, a fragile bridge to Japan's medieval soul. Even the backstage rituals remain sacred. Masks are never placed face up that would trap the spirit inside, and performers still whisper prayers before stepping onto the stage's sacred pine floor. This tradition reveals a profound truth about how our ancestors understood identity. Unlike Western theater where actors play roles, no performers sought to disappear completely, becoming vessels for something greater. In a world obsessed with individualism, these masks whisper an older wisdom, that sometimes we find our deepest truths by surrendering to stories bigger than ourselves. Now we turn from the delicate art of transformation to a ritual where bonds were sealed in the most visceral way imaginable among the Celtic tribes of ancient Europe. The wind howls across the Eurasian steppe as two Scythian warriors kneel in the tall grass, their blades glinting in the firelight. With a swift, practiced motion, each slices his forearm, letting crimson droplets fall into a shared cup of fermented mare's milk. As the blood swirls into the pale liquid, they raise it to the sky, a toast to the gods, to each other, to a bond no enemy could sever. This was no mere oath, it was a sacred alchemy, transforming two men into brothers of the flesh. Herodotus wrote of these rituals with a mix of awe and alarm, describing how the warriors would then drink deeply, their lips stained red as the pact sealed their fates together. What makes this ritual so gripping is how it mirrored the Scythians' entire worldview. These weren't just ceremonies, they were survival strategies. In a world of endless grasslands and sudden battles, loyalty meant everything. The blood wine ritual, sometimes performed with the addition of earth from their homeland, was insurance against betrayal. Break the pact, and you weren't just dishonored, you were cursed, your body believed to rot from within as the mingled blood turned against you. But there's a haunting poetry here too. The Scythians, often dismissed by their enemies as barbarians, created a ritual of startling intimacy. The sharing of blood wasn't about dominance but balance, an equal measure given freely. Even their burial mounds reflect this. Warriors interred side by side, their weapons intertwined, as if death itself couldn't untie the knot they'd forged in life. Echoes of this practice ripple through history. Viking blood brotherhoods, medieval knightly oaths, even the phrase blood brothers in modern language all carry whispers of those steppe rituals. Yet the Scythian version stands apart for its raw immediacy. No contracts, no witnesses, just two people and the unshakable truth that some promises taste of iron and salt. Now let's step from the windswept plains into a world where death was no barrier to communion. In ancient Rome, families gathered not to mourn their departed, but to feast with them. The streets of Rome fell strangely quiet each February as families gathered in twilight, carrying baskets of violets and bread to tombs lining the city's outskirts. This was Parentalia, 9 days when the veil between worlds grew thin, and ancestors were welcomed back not as ghosts but as honored guests. Picture a mother kneeling at her grandfather's grave, carefully pouring milk into a channel carved in the stone, whispering updates about the family as the liquid vanished into the earth. This wasn't mourning, it was conversation across centuries. What made these rituals extraordinary was their intimacy. Romans didn't just leave offerings, they set places at dinner tables for the dead, serving their favorite foods as if expecting them to lift a spoon. Tomb inscriptions often included invitations like "Come, dine with us," revealing a belief that the departed remained part of the household's daily life. But there was tension beneath the reverence. Families avoided speaking names aloud at night, fearing to attract restless spirits. Even weddings were forbidden during Parentalia, lest joyful noise offend the solemn visitors. The festival's climax on the 9th day, the Feralia, laid bare this duality. At dawn, offerings of grain and salt were left at crossroads, a meal for ancestors who had no living descendants to remember them. By sunset, Rome erupted in the rowdy Cara Cognatio, where families shared raucous feasts celebrating kinship's unbroken chain. Modern traditions like Mexico's Dia de Muertos or Sicily's Night of the Dead carry echoes of this ancient dance between solemnity and celebration. Yet what lingers most is how Parentalia reflected Roman pragmatism. Their afterlife wasn't some distant paradise, but a shadowy continuation of earthly relationships. By feeding the dead, they ensured these spirits would protect the living, a spiritual contract written in petals and wine. When a Roman child placed a toy on a relative's grave, they weren't just remembering the past, they were investing in the future. Now we turn from the quiet communion of tombs to a ritual where darkness itself became a canvas for the divine. In the sun-baked temples of ancient Egypt, priests performed a ceremony that harnessed shadows as sacred messengers. The flickering glow of an oil lamp casts elongated shadows across a taut cotton screen in a Javanese village square, as the dalang's wooden mallet taps a rhythmic signal against his puppet box. This is Wayang Kulit, where buffalo hide carved thinner than parchment becomes a cast of gods and demons, their silhouettes dancing to the metallic shimmer of a gamelan orchestra. To call this mere shadow puppetry would be like calling the ocean a puddle. For over 1,000 years, these performances have been sacred ceremonies disguised as entertainment, where a single puppeteer channels entire cosmologies through his fingertips. What makes this ritual extraordinary is how it collapses time and space. The dalang doesn't just move puppets, he becomes a conductor of realities. With one hand manipulating Arjuna's spear and the other shaking a rattle to mimic thunder, he simultaneously narrates in 5 distinct voices while cueing musicians with foot taps. All night long, he weaves tales from the Mahabharata, his puppet's shadows stretching and shrinking as the lamp's flame breathes. Villagers don't watch these stories, they experience them viscerally, gasping when the monkey god Hanuman leaps impossibly high or weeping when star-crossed lovers fade into the shadows. The magic lies in the liminal space between screen and audience. Those flickering silhouettes were believed to be actual spirits summoned by the dalang's chants. Notice how some puppets have grotesquely exaggerated features, bulging eyes, claw-like hands designed to cast perfectly proportioned shadows. This was sacred geometry in action, proving that truth often reveals itself only after passing through fire and transformation. Even the banana log where puppets are planted isn't just a stand, it represents the cosmic mountain connecting heaven and earth. Modern performances still honor these roots. Before each show, the dalang blesses his puppets with incense, treating them as vessels rather than props. The most sacred figures, like the Tree of Life puppet Kaon, are never allowed to touch the ground. And when the final puppets are put away at dawn, there's always one left on the screen, a silent reminder that the stories never truly end, they just wait for the next lamp to be lit. Now we turn from the eloquent shadows of Java to a ritual where silence itself became the most powerful language. In the misty highlands of Tibet, the desert wind carried no sound across the cliffs of Qumran, where the Essenes gathered each dawn in deliberate silence. These Jewish mystics, living in austere solitude near the Dead Sea, believed true divinity could only be heard in the absence of words. Their daily rituals began with ritual immersion, not just cleansing the body, but preparing the soul like blank parchment for sacred inscription. After these purifying dips in stone cisterns, they would sit motionless for hours, eyes lowered, hands resting, palms up on their knees, waiting for what they called the voice that comes without speaking. What set the Essenes apart was their radical commitment to this quietude. While other Jewish sects debated scripture aloud in bustling temple courts, these men copied sacred texts in hushed scriptoriums, believing each stroke of the quill was a form of prayer. The famous Dead Sea Scrolls discovered in nearby caves may be their legacy, not just writings, but physical manifestations of their contemplative practice. Imagine the scene: a scribe painstakingly inscribing Isaiah's prophecies by lamplight, his breathing slowed to match the rhythm of his pen, treating every letter as a vessel for the ineffable. Modern science reveals startling wisdom in their methods. Neuroscientists now know that prolonged silence stimulates hippocampal growth, enhancing memory and emotional regulation, precisely the mental states the Essenes cultivated for spiritual receptivity. Their rituals anticipated mindfulness meditation by 2 millennia, sharing the same core truth: that stillness isn't empty but full. Even their communal meals were eaten in silence, each bite an act of gratitude, each sip of water a sacrament. Yet there was urgency beneath their calm. The Essenes lived as if the world was ending because to them it always was. Their scrolls speak of an impending cosmic reckoning where only those who'd learned heaven's silent language would be spared. This apocalyptic edge makes their legacy doubly haunting. Those dry caves preserved not just texts, but the tangible ache of humans trying to touch the divine before time ran out. Now we turn from deliberate silence to a realm where voices spoke in riddles, the dream temples of ancient Greece, where sleepers sought visions that would alter the course of lives and empires. The marble steps of Asclepius's temple gleam under the moonlight as a feverish pilgrim lies down on the sacred abaton, his body pressed against the cool stone where countless others have waited for divine intervention. This wasn't just sleep, it was dream incubation, a ritual as precise as it was mysterious. For the ancient Greeks, illness wasn't merely physical. It was a disruption of the soul, and healing required messages from the gods themselves. As the pilgrim drifted into twilight, priests moved silently through the dim halls, burning herbs to purify the air, sage for clarity, bay leaves for prophecy, while the scent of honey cakes left as offerings to Asclepius lingered like a promise. What made these rituals so revolutionary was their fusion of spirituality and practicality. Pilgrims would first undergo cleansing rites, baths in sacred springs, abstention from wine, before being led to the Incoimaterion, the dreaming chamber. Here they'd lie on the skins of sacrificed rams, believing the animal's vitality would transfer to them. When dreams came, they weren't hazy visions but vivid encounters. Asclepius might appear with his serpent-entwined staff, performing spectral surgeries, or a sacred dog might lick the dreamer's wounds. Upon waking, priests trained in wonneromancy, the art of dream interpretation, would decode every detail. A dream of pouring water might prescribe hydrotherapy. Visions of herbs dictated poultice ingredients. Some prescriptions survive in temple inscriptions. The blind man dreamed the god pressed fingers into his eyes. At dawn, he saw shadows. Modern sleep science reveals uncanny parallels. Harvard studies show that during REM sleep, the brain processes emotional trauma. much like the Greeks believed dreams purged spiritual afflictions. The placebo effect, now a cornerstone of medical research, may explain some healings. Pilgrims' absolute faith in the ritual activated their bodies' innate recovery mechanisms. Even the temple's architecture played a role. Engineers designed the abaton to amplify subterranean water sounds, creating theta wave-inducing white noise that deepened trance states. Yet the true genius lay in the ritual's duality. While some left epidors cured, others received cryptic dreams requiring return visits, ensuring the temples remained thriving centers of both healing and community. Today, as neuroscientists map how dreams consolidate memory and process grief, we're rediscovering what the Greeks knew: that night holds remedies daylight cannot see. Now we step from the hushed dream chambers to a ritual where movement itself became devotion. High in the Andes, the Quackwa-Kawa bridge builders, the worn stones of Chartres Cathedral hold a secret beneath their feet, a winding path so ancient that pilgrims once traveled days just to trace its curves with bare feet. This medieval labyrinth, inlaid into the floor like a frozen river of stone, wasn't designed to confuse but to clarify. Unlike mazes with dead ends and tricks, its single coiled route offered no wrong turns, only a slow, inevitable journey toward the center. Pilgrims would enter on their knees, their fingers brushing the grooves worn smooth by centuries of seekers before them, each step a physical prayer. The path's 11 concentric circles mirrored the soul's ascent toward divine union, while its twists exactly half turning left, half right symbolized life's perfect balance between chaos and order. What's astonishing is how these walks transformed architecture into theology. As pilgrims moved through the labyrinth's 4 quadrants representing the 4 Gospels, their very footsteps retold the Passion of Christ. The journey inward mirrored his suffering, the center stood for crucifixion, and the return path symbolized resurrection. Some walked it for hours, reciting psalms until the stones seemed to hum beneath them. Others carried burdens, a sick child's blanket, a lock of hair from a departed loved one, laying them at the center like offerings. The labyrinth became a pilgrimage in miniature, allowing those who couldn't travel to Jerusalem to make the spiritual journey metaphorically, their bodies moving while their souls soared. Today, you can still see the Chartres labyrinth's original design, though centuries of shuffling feet have blurred its edges. Modern visitors often report something uncanny, a sensation of time collapsing as they walk, as if the medieval pilgrims' whispers still cling to the stones. Neuroscientists might explain this as the effect of rhythmic movement on the brain, inducing meditative states, but the deeper truth lies in the ritual's enduring power. By turning faith into motion, it made the intangible tangible. Every winding step was a reminder that spirituality isn't just thought or feeling, it's something we do with our whole bodies. Now we turn from the quiet revolutions of stone underfoot to a ritual where the divine wasn't walked toward but sailed upon. For the Polynesian navigators of the Pacific, the ocean wasn't just an expanse of water. It was a living god, its waves a language, its currents a map. Their sacred canoe voyages, the moment the first winter rains soaked the volcanic soil of Hawaii, an extraordinary transformation swept across the islands. Canoes were hauled ashore, weapons were wrapped in bark cloth, and entire villages turned their faces toward the sea, not in conquest but in welcome. This was Makahiki, a 4-month sacred season when Hawaiians believed Lono, the long-haired god of rain and abundance, sailed across the horizon on a cloud-embraced canoe. His arrival marked more than just a festival, it was a radical reordering of society. War chiefs became storytellers, farmers became athletes, and the land itself was given the rarest gift of all, rest. At the heart of Makahiki lay a profound ecological contract. Farmers let their fields lie fallow, fishermen avoided spawning grounds, and even the ocean was granted reprieve as kapu taboos prohibited certain catches. This wasn't superstition, it was sustainability codified into ritual. The Hawaiians understood what modern ecology now confirms, that ecosystems need cycles of recovery. What's remarkable is how they enforced this wisdom. White banners called lonomakua were carried around each island's perimeter, symbolizing Lono's watchful presence. Any violation of the peace, from quarrels to unauthorized farming, was seen as an affront to the god himself. But Makahiki was far from somber. Villages erupted in games testing strength and skill, stone-lifting contests, sled races down grassy hills, and ulu maker, where competitors rolled stone discs between narrow stakes. These weren't just pastimes, they were spiritual exercises. When a warrior shifted from spear throwing to konine, a strategy board game, he wasn't merely playing. He was learning balance, exchanging the violence of battle for the artistry of intellect. Even the food held meaning. The great feasts featured symbolic dishes like steamed taro and roasted pig, each ingredient celebrating the reciprocity between humans and nature. The festival's climax came with the ceremonial return of Lono's Makahiki staff to the sea. This towering crossbeam, draped with white copper cloth and hung with feather lei, was carried by priests to the shoreline. As waves lapped at their ankles, they chanted the god back to his celestial home, releasing the islands from sacred time back into the rhythm of seasons. Today's revived Makahiki carries new layers of meaning. Native Hawaiians use the games to teach children nearly lost language and traditions, while the kapu on overfishing aligns with modern conservation efforts. When paddlers reenact Lono's canoe voyage using traditional star navigation, they're not just honoring the past, they're steering toward a future where ancient wisdom guides ecological healing. The true lesson of Makahiki isn't in its rituals, but in its radical premise, that sometimes the most powerful act is collective pause. Now we turn from the communal rhythms of Hawaii to a ritual where identity itself could be remade. Among the Quackwa-Kawa people of the Pacific Northwest, carved cedar masks held the power to dissolve the boundaries between human and spirit, past and present. The morning fog clung to Venice's canals like a bridal veil on the day of the Festa del Mare, when 12 girls from the city's poorest families were transformed into living icons. Dressed in lavish gowns donated by wealthy patrons, their hair woven with pearls, these young women became vessels for something greater than themselves, a fusion of divine grace and civic pride. The procession began at San Pietro di Castello, where the chosen girls, selected for their virtue rather than beauty, were blessed by the bishop before boarding gondolas draped in scarlet. As they glided past the palazzos, crowds threw flower petals from balconies, their cheers mingling with the chants of priests. This wasn't just a pageant, it was alchemy turning poverty into sacred theater. What made this ritual extraordinary was its delicate balance of opposites. The girls borrowed finery, silk from Byzantium, lace from Burano symbolized both Mary's humility and Venice's opulence. Their route traced the city's heartbeat, from the shipyards where laborers paused their hammering to cross themselves, to the Rialto markets where fishmongers laid down their scales to kneel. Even the timing held meaning. The festival fell on the purification of Mary, 40 days after Christmas, mirroring the biblical presentation at the temple. But beneath the piety lay shrewd social engineering. By elevating these girls, Venice's oligarchs softened their image, masking inequality with a spectacle of communal harmony. The tradition's dark undercurrents surfaced in its abrupt end. In 943, pirates snatched the Marys from their gondolas, sparking a vengeful naval chase. Though the girls were rescued, the incident exposed Venice's vulnerabilities. The ritual limped on for centuries before fading, its essence distilled into carnivals' masquerades. Yet traces linger in unexpected places. Modern Venetian brides still visit Santa Maria Formosa, the festival's spiritual home, to lay bouquets where the Marys once stood. Now we shift from floating pageantry to a ritual where stories were buried like treasure. In the cliffside tombs of the Moch people, rulers weren't interred with gold alone. They were entombed with ceramic flutes, their melodies sealed for eternity. The longships cut through the mist like blades, their prows curling into dragon-headed silhouettes against the dawn. But these vessels would never reach open water. For the Vikings, a ship wasn't just transportation to the afterlife, it was the afterlife itself. Picture the scene: a chieftain's body dressed in his finest woolens, his sword laid across his chest, lowered into a trench lined with overlapping oak planks. Around him, thralls arranged his drinking horns, gaming pieces, even his favorite hunting dogs, all sacrificed to serve him in Valhalla. Then, as mourners sang of Odin's hall, the ship was buried under a mountain of earth, becoming an island of memory in the Norse world's endless sea. What makes these burials so mesmerizing is how they blur the line between practicality and myth. The Oseberg ship, excavated in Norway in 1904, held not just human remains but sledges, tapestries, and a four-posted bed, a cross-section of daily life frozen in time. Analysis of the wood reveals startling details. The keel was scarred from actual voyages, proving this wasn't a ceremonial replica but a working vessel retired to higher service. Even the positioning held meaning. Ships were often aligned east-west, their prows pointing toward the rising sun, a symbolic journey toward rebirth. Modern reconstructions like Denmark's Sea Stallion have unveiled the engineering genius behind these floating tombs. When sailors replicated a voyage from Roskilde to Dublin using 9th century techniques, they discovered the ship's shallow drafts allowed navigation in just 3 feet of water, perfect for ascending mythical rivers to the afterlife. The vessel's flexibility, with planks lashed together with spruce roots, let them ride waves like living creatures. No wonder the Vikings believed their ships could traverse the boundary between worlds. Yet the most haunting finds are the silent witnesses. At Lindholm Hoge, a stallion and ox were buried alongside their master, their bones showing no signs of struggle, likely drugged before sacrifice. In Russia's Volga region, a chieftainess was interred with a peacock feather from Byzantium, proving even in death, status sailed on. These burials weren't just about honoring the dead. They were cosmic insurance policies, ensuring warriors arrived in style for Ragnarok's final battle. Now we turn from water's quiet embrace to a ritual where fire didn't just cleanse, it renewed. Every 52 years, the Aztecs watched their priests ignite new flames atop the Templo Mayor, signaling the rebirth of time itself. The night air over Tenochtitlan grew thick with anticipation as priests climbed the steps of the Huaxtlan volcano, their bare feet pressing into cold stone. Below them, the city lay in absolute darkness, every hearth extinguished, every cooking fire smothered. This was the Zumilpilli, the Aztec new fire ceremony, a ritual so pivotal that its failure was believed to halt the sun itself. Every 52 years, when the sacred calendar completed its cycle, the Aztecs watched the Pleiades constellation crest the midnight sky. If the stars held their course, the priests would strike a new flame on the chest of a sacrificed warrior, using friction sticks to ignite a blaze that would be carried by runners to every corner of the empire. But if the stars faltered, the Tzitzimaim star demons would descend to devour mankind. What makes this ritual unforgettable is its breathtaking stakes. For months beforehand, families destroyed household idols. Pregnant women hid in granaries believed to transform into beasts if seen by the Tzitzimaim, and children wore masks to disguise their humanity. The 5 unlucky days before the ceremony were called Nemontemi, empty days, when time itself paused and chaos loomed. Archaeologists have found evidence of mass offerings during these periods: jade figurines, obsidian blades, even the skeletons of scarlet macaws from distant rainforests, all given to appease the gods. The tension was physical. You could taste it in the air, thick as the incense rising from shattered copal urns. Yet the ceremony's true genius lay in its astronomy. The 52-year cycle wasn't arbitrary. It marked the rare alignment of the solar and sacred calendars, a cosmic synchrony the Aztecs called the binding of years. Modern calculations reveal their precision. The Pleiades' position signaled the dry season's end, making this the perfect time to renew agricultural vows. The new fire was more than symbolism. It was a reset button for society. Tax debts were forgiven, slaves freed, and rival city-states suspended wars to receive the sacred flame. Even the method of lighting the fire held meaning. The friction sticks represented the divine masculine and feminine, their union sparking creation anew. Today, fragments of this ritual survive in Mexico's indigenous communities. In Zacatecas, elders still observe a muted version of the ceremony, offering cornmeal instead of blood. Meanwhile, archaeologists at Templo Mayor have uncovered charred remains of the last new fire ceremony before the Spanish conquest, a poignant relic of a world that believed flame could hold back the dark. Now we turn from the embers of Tenochtitlan to a ritual where movement became prayer. In the highlands of Tibet, the black hat dancers of the Cham festival whirl like storm winds, their silk robes flaring as they summon deities through the sacred geometry of their steps. The hypnotic spin of a whirling dervish begins with stillness, a moment of quiet reverence as the dancer presses one foot firmly onto the wooden floor of a konya tek. Then, slowly, the right foot crosses over the left, arms unfold like wings, and the world starts to blur. This isn't dance in the ordinary sense. It's the Mevlevi Sema ceremony, a 7-century-old Sufi ritual where rotation becomes revelation. The dervish's tall camel hair hat represents the tombstone of ego, his billowing white skirt the shroud of worldly attachments. As he pivots counterclockwise, his right palm turns upward to receive divine grace, while his left points downward, channeling that energy to Earth. Each rotation mirrors planets orbiting the sun, a microcosm of cosmic harmony. What makes this ritual extraordinary is its precision as spiritual technology. The dervish doesn't just spin randomly. He completes exactly 33 rotations per minute, a number symbolizing the stages of sacred ascent. Modern neuroscience reveals startling effects. This specific RPM induces theta brainwaves, the same state achieved by deep meditation. The dancer's training is grueling. Novices spend years mastering the foot kiss, a bow so deep their foreheads touch the ground before ever attempting a single turn. When Rumi, the ritual's founder, first whirled through the streets of 13th century Anatolia, onlookers thought him mad, but his ecstatic poetry explains the method. "You are the sky's wheel," he wrote, turning around the pole of the heart. Today's ceremonies preserve every nuance. The live ney flute music follows centuries-old modal scales believed to dissolve ego barriers, while the circular floor design replicates Sufi cosmology, the outer ring for earthly life, the inner for divine reality. Watch closely as the dervish's skirts flare. The folds create perfect spirals, visual echoes of the soul's journey. After 90 minutes of uninterrupted whirling, the dancers stop without stumbling, their equilibrium untouched. This isn't just physical prowess, it's the manifestation of a sacred paradox, finding stillness through motion, discovering clarity in dizziness. But the Sema's true power lies in its inclusivity. Unlike many medieval rituals, spectators aren't passive observers. The ceremony begins with a hymn praising all prophets from Adam to Muhammad, acknowledging multiple paths to truth. When the dervishes bow during the ritual's 4 salams, they honor not just God but every atom of creation. Modern practitioners include doctors, taxi drivers, even atheists seeking mindful movement, proof that some rituals transcend their origins to become universal languages of transcendence. Now we turn from the living whirl of devotion to a ritual where silence was broken for the dead. The Tupinambá people of coastal Brazil crafted intricate ceramic urns for their ancestors, vessels that didn't just hold bones but gave them voices. The wind howls across a high Himalayan plateau as monks chant, their voices swallowed by the vastness. Below them, a body lies wrapped in white cloth atop a flat stone, an offering not to the earth but to the sky. This is Tibetan sky burial, where the dead are returned to nature in the most direct way imaginable. The Rojiapas, or body breakers, work with rhythmic precision, using ceremonial knives to prepare the remains for the waiting vultures. To outsiders, it may seem harsh, but in the thin air of the Tibetan plateau, where wood is too scarce for cremation and the ground too rocky for burial, this ritual becomes an act of profound generosity. What makes this practice extraordinary is its radical view of impermanence. Tibetan Buddhists see the body as an empty vessel. Once the soul departs, a temporary shell, no more sacred than a discarded robe. By giving their dead to the vultures, they perform the ultimate act of compassion, sustaining other lives with what remains. The birds themselves are considered dakinis, celestial beings who carry the soul heavenward on their wings. Some monasteries even keep sky burial grounds at precise altitudes where the air is thin enough to slow decomposition, but not too cold for the vultures to feed. Every detail reflects a deep ecological wisdom, the way the Rojiapas avoid cutting bones which could harm the birds, or how families never watch the ritual, releasing attachment completely. Modern science reveals unexpected layers to this ancient custom. Researchers studying Himalayan vultures found they can digest anthrax and other pathogens that would linger in soil burials, proof that sky burials protect living communities from disease. The practice also leaves no carbon footprint, unlike cremation, making it one of the most sustainable death rites on Earth. Yet what lingers most isn't practicality, but philosophy. When a Tibetan elder tells her grandchildren she'll one day feed the birds, she's teaching them that death isn't an end but a transformation, where one life becomes the wind, the wings, the sky itself. Now we turn from this stark communion with the elements to a ritual where transformation wasn't symbolic but spectacular. Among the Quackwa-Kawa people of the Pacific Northwest, carved cedar masks didn't just depict spirits, they summoned them. When a dancer pulled the strings of a hamatsa mask during winter ceremonies, its long beak would snap open, revealing not wood but living flesh, the dancer having become the raven spirit before the audience's widening eyes. This wasn't theater, it was metamorphosis in motion. The mask's power lay in their construction. Each was hollowed from a single red cedar log, its grain carefully followed to suggest the spirit's form. Paint mixed with salmon eggs gave the colors a luminous quality in firelight, while hidden mechanisms allowed faces to split open, revealing secondary masks beneath. But the true magic happened in performance. Dancers trained for years to sync their movements with the mask's transformations. A slow turn might reveal a human face becoming a wolf, while a sudden jerk of the head could make an eagle's wings seem to beat. Anthropologists studying these rituals discovered something astonishing. The masks often represented animals crucial to local ecosystems: ravens, bears, orcas, suggesting the ceremonies reinforced conservation values. When a dancer embodied the salmon spirit, he wasn't just entertaining. He was reminding the tribe of their covenant with the natural world. Today, museum conservators use CT scans to study these masks without disturbing their sacred integrity, revealing layers of meaning even the carvers might not have consciously intended. What makes these rituals timeless is how they dissolve boundaries. A Quackwa-Kawa elder once told an ethnographer, "The mask doesn't hide your face, it reveals your soul." In that moment of transformation, dancer and spirit, human and animal, past and present became one. Not so different, perhaps, from the vultures carrying Tibetan souls skyward, both rituals reminding us that the most sacred acts often lie in letting go. The hills of ancient Ireland blazed with light on the 1st of May as communities gathered to watch druids kindle the sacred Beltane fires. This wasn't just a seasonal marker. It was a cosmic reset, a moment when the veil between worlds grew thin enough for magic to slip through. Picture the scene: oak logs stacked taller than a man, their flames licking the twilight as herds of cattle were driven between twin bonfires, the heat branding their hides with invisible protection against disease. Young couples, hands clasped, took running leaps over glowing embers, their laughter mixing with the crackle of burning hawthorn. The air smelled of burning herbs and fresh milk as families anointed doorposts with ashes to ward off misfortune. Beltane wasn't merely a festival, it was a collective exhale after the long grip of winter, a celebration of life's stubborn persistence. What made these fires extraordinary was their dual nature, both practical and mystical. The Celts believed the flames carried the power of the sun itself, borrowed to cleanse and energize. Farmers timed lambing and planting by the Beltane calendar, while druids read omens in the smoke's direction. Even the fuel held meaning. Sacred woods like oak for strength, apple for love, and rowan for protection were carefully selected. Modern excavations at Essene, the ritual center of Ireland, reveal fire pits layered with charred animal bones and amulets, proof of ceremonies spanning centuries. The magic lingered in the details. After the main blaze, villagers carried torches home to relight their hearths, a symbolic reuniting of community. Leftover ashes were mixed into fields as fertilizer, blending spiritual and agricultural renewal. Some traditions whispered that fairies grew bold at Beltane, and offerings of sweet bannock cakes were left at fairy forts to appease them. Today's neo-pagan revivals keep these echoes alive. In Edinburgh, the Beltane Fire Society stages breathtaking processions with body-painted performers and drummers, while in rural Galway, families still crown a May Queen with wildflowers. Yet Beltane's deepest legacy might be its radical joy. In a world often focused on solemn rites, here was a ritual that celebrated fertility, passion, and the sheer exuberance of being alive. When those couples jumped the flames, they weren't just praying for children, they were reveling in possibility, in the promise that life, like fire, could always begin anew. Now we turn from the crackling energy of Beltane to a ritual where silence spoke volumes. In the cliffside tombs of the Moche civilization, rulers weren't buried alone, they were entombed with ceramic flutes, their hollow chambers waiting to sing the stories of the dead. The golden adze hovered over the mummy's still lips as the Sem priest chanted the ancient words. You shall breathe, you shall see, you shall hear, each syllable charged with the weight of eternity. This was the opening of the mouth, an Egyptian ritual so precise that its steps were meticulously illustrated on tomb walls like a divine instruction manual. But this wasn't just ceremony, it was spiritual surgery, a delicate operation to reawaken the senses of the dead for their journey beyond. The tools themselves were sacred, a forked pea-shent scepter to part the celestial waters, a curved peseshkef blade said to be shaped like the finger of Anubis, even a ritual leg of beef, symbolizing the sacrifice of Horus's eye, gently pressed against the mummy's mouth. Every gesture held layers of meaning, transforming the corpse from a preserved shell into a living vessel for the Ka, the eternal life force. What makes this rite extraordinary is how it merged physical and metaphysical worlds. The ceremony's climax came when the priest touched the mummy's mouth with a miniature adze, not to force it open, but to symbolically unseal senses dulled by death. Papyrus scrolls like the Book of the Dead describe the moment in vivid detail. The sky is clear for you, the earth is stable for you, the gods give you their faces. Modern CT scans of mummies reveal surprising evidence. Some show slight fractures around the jaw, likely from these ritual touches, proving the practice wasn't just symbolic but physically enacted. The deeper genius lay in the ritual's duality. While the mouth opening restored speech and taste, parallel rites addressed other senses. A priest might anoint the mummy's eyes with perfumed oils to restore sight, or wave a feather before its nostrils to symbolically clear the breath. Even the positioning mattered. The ceremony always occurred at the tomb's entrance, the threshold between worlds. Archaeologists have found practice ostraca flakes of limestone where priests sketched the ritual steps, showing how seriously they took this sacred responsibility. Yet the most haunting relics are the actual tools discovered in tomb workshops. The adzes still bear traces of gold leaf, their handles worn smooth from generations of priestly hands. Some burial chambers contain tiny model toolkits, miniature versions left with the deceased as afterlife insurance. And those hieroglyphic manuals, they weren't just guides, they were maps of consciousness itself, teaching that existence didn't end with death, it merely changed form. Now we turn from the eloquent silence of Egyptian tombs to a ritual where sound wasn't just heard but seen. In the jungles of Central America, the Maya crafted whistles shaped like jaguars and gods, but these weren't ordinary instruments. When blown, their pitch-perfect tones created standing waves that made flames dance in precise patterns, a phenomenon modern scientists call acoustic combustion. For the Maya, this was more than physics, it was the voice of the gods made visible. The wilderness was never silent for the Lakota boy kneeling on bare butt, his face streaked with sacred red ochre as the wind carried whispers through the pines. This was his Hanbulsaya vision quest, a ritual as old as the hills themselves, stripped of weapons and comforts, wrapped only in a single bison robe. He would spend 4 days and nights without food or water, waiting for the Great Spirit to speak through dreams or animal messengers. Far from mere endurance test, this was a sacred dialogue between human and cosmos. The visions that came, whether of thunder beings, buffalo herds, or circling eagles, weren't just personal epiphanies. They were maps for the entire tribe's future, guiding decisions from hunting grounds to warfare. What set these quests apart was their radical trust in nature's classroom. Elders didn't prescribe what to seek. They simply prepared the initiate with purification rites in sweat lodges, their bodies cleansed with sage smoke and their minds focused with prayer sticks. The solitude itself was the teacher. Modern brain scans reveal why this worked. Prolonged fasting increases theta waves, enhancing dream vividness, while sleep deprivation can induce visionary states. The Lakota understood this intuitively, crafting a ritual that leveraged physiology for spiritual awakening. The real magic lay in how these visions were integrated. Returning seekers would describe their experiences to medicine men who decoded symbols through ancient frameworks. A spotted eagle might signal leadership destiny, while a crawling ant could mean the community needed humility. Some quests even altered tribal history. Black Elk's great vision as a boy, later recounted in his famous book, redefined the Sioux's relationship with the sacred hoop of life. Today, psychologists recognize parallels in wilderness therapy programs, where isolation in nature helps recalibrate troubled minds, yet contemporary vision quests hold new layers. Native organizers now combine traditional protocols with environmental activism, designating quest sites as protected lands. When a modern Lakota youth spots an endangered black-footed ferret during their vigil, it's not just a personal sign, it's a call to ecological stewardship. The ritual's essence remains unchanged. True vision comes not from seeking answers, but from learning how to listen. Now we turn from the silent dialogue of quests to a ritual where movement itself became scripture. Along the cobbled streets of medieval Spain, the flagellant's rhythmic footsteps and swinging lashes transformed pain into a living psalm. The bamboo whisk moves in slow, deliberate circles, frothing the vibrant green matcha into a velvety emulsion, not a single motion wasted, not a single breath out of place. This is Chanoyu, the Japanese tea ceremony, where every gesture carries the weight of centuries. Far more than a beverage, it's a living philosophy distilled into 40 minutes of choreographed stillness. The terum itself is a study in intentional imperfection. Walls of weathered clay, a doorway so low even samurai had to bow, a single scroll with calligraphy chosen to reflect the season. Here, the host's act of folding a silk cloth becomes as meaningful as the tea itself, each fold cleansing not just the utensils, but the mind. What makes this ritual extraordinary is how it transforms the mundane into the sacred. The bamboo scoop carved from a single internode represents humility. The irregular pottery bowl, prized for its flaws, embodies wabi-sabi, the beauty of transience. Even the way guests rotate the bowl before drinking speaks volumes. Turning it twice avoids placing lips on the front, a silent acknowledgement of the craftsman's artistry. Modern neuroscience reveals why these precise actions resonate. Repetitive, focused movements activate the default mode network, the brain's center for introspection and karma, proof that the ceremony's Zen Buddhist roots understood human psychology long before fMRI machines. The true genius lies in the ceremony's four principles: harmony wa, respect ke, purity se, and tranquility joku. A host might spend years perfecting the angle for pouring water. Too abrupt sounds harsh, too slow seems hesitant. Seasonal touches whisper subtle poetry. A maple leaf in autumn, a single camellia bud in winter. Legendary tea master Essene no Rikyu took this further, famously trimming a maple tree until just one crimson leaf remained, not for aesthetics, but to remind guests that all beauty is fleeting. Today, Chanoyu's influence ripples far beyond terums. Japanese CEOs study it to hone leadership presence, surgeons adopt its focus for precision, and mindfulness apps borrow its pacing. When a Kyoto tea school teaches children to wait 20 minutes for water to boil, they're not just learning patience, they're internalizing that some things cannot be rushed. In our age of instant gratification, the ceremony's slow grace feels almost revolutionary, a reminder that meaning isn't found in the tea, but in the space between each movement. Now we turn from the quiet certainty of Chanoyu to a ritual where reality itself was malleable. Among the human tribes of the Colorado River, dreamers didn't just interpret visions, they shared them in communal songs, weaving their sleeping minds into the fabric of daily life. The palace courtyard of shimmered with gold and lapis lazuli as the king ascended the dais, his robes heavy with the weight of divinity. This was no ordinary wedding, it was the sacred marriage rite, where mortal rulers became the bridegrooms of Inanna, the capricious goddess of love and war. For one night each year, the boundary between heaven and earth dissolved as the king enacted an elaborate script preserved on cuneiform tablets, his every gesture choreographed to channel the goddess's favor onto the land. The ritual began with a ceremonial bath in honey and milk, then progressed to a feast where the king and a high priestess standing in for Inanna exchanged vows over 7 golden cups of date wine. As musicians played lyres tuned to the hula-pu scale, said to mimic the goddess's voice, the couple retreated to a bedchamber hung with cedar boughs, their union symbolizing the fertile marriage of sky and earth. What made this ritual extraordinary was its seamless fusion of theater and statecraft. The king wasn't just performing piety, he was leveraging it. Tablets from Lagash reveal how rulers timed the ceremony with the autumn equinox, ensuring the spectacle coincided with critical harvest decisions. The priestess's role carried real political clout. Some, like in Hedwana History's first named author, used their position to influence temple economies. Even the love songs sung during the rite doubled as propaganda, comparing the king's strength to the mythical hero Gilgamesh. Modern linguists studying these texts found startling wordplay. Phrases like "the wild bull who sweetens the land" worked as both erotic poetry and agricultural metaphors. The rite's legacy surfaces in unexpected places. Elements reappear in Solomon's coronation psalms, Byzantine imperial weddings, even the British monarch's title, Defender of the Faith. But perhaps its most enduring lesson is how ritual transforms power into story. When those Mesopotamian kings laid down with goddesses, they weren't just seeking divine endorsement. They were rewriting history itself, casting their rule as destiny written in the stars. Now we turn from the perfumed chambers of sacred unions to a ritual where the divine wasn't courted but conquered. For the Polynesian navigators who braved the Pacific, the ocean wasn't just a realm to cross, it was Tangaroa, a living god whose moods could be read in the dance of currents and the song of waves. Their canoe launch ceremonies. The vast Pacific stretched before the Polynesian navigator as he knelt on the canoe's woven mat, his hands trembling slightly as he arranged offerings of taro and kava root on a small wooden altar. This was the Pule Hanua, the sacred wayfinding ceremony, a ritual as precise as the stars he would soon follow. With his crew gathered close, he began the ancient chant, calling upon the spirits of ancestors who had crossed these waters before him. Each syllable carried generations of knowledge, from the way clouds cling to unseen islands to the subtle shifts in ocean swells that betrayed distant land. The chant wasn't just prayer, it was a living map encoding celestial pathways in its rhythms. As the last note faded into the wind, the navigator pressed his forehead to the canoe's prow, feeling the resonance of the wood once a living tree, now a vessel for living tradition. What made these ceremonies extraordinary was their fusion of science and spirit. Navigators memorized star paths with names like Hokulea Arcturus and Hikianalia Speaker, not just as points of light but as ancestral guides. Wave patterns told stories. A sudden cross swell might hint at an invisible atoll, while the flight paths of seabirds became arrows pointing toward land. Modern experiments have proven their accuracy. In 1976, the Hokulea voyaging canoe sailed from Hawaii to Tahiti using only traditional methods, arriving with pinpoint precision. The secret lay in the ceremony's rigor. Trainees spent years blindfolded in canoes, learning to see through the feel of waves beneath them and the taste of salt on the wind. Today, these rituals roar back to life with newfound urgency. Hawaiian schools now teach star compass navigation alongside algebra, and young navigators like Nainoa Thompson have become cultural heroes. When Thompson recounts how his mentor Maupiailug, a Micronesian master navigator, taught him to read the ocean's texture, he speaks not of lost arts but of living wisdom. The revival isn't just about pride, it's a rebellion against the idea that tradition must yield to technology. GPS may plot coordinates, but the Pule Hanua charts something deeper, a connection to the ocean as ancestor, teacher, and home. Now we turn from the salt-kissed prayers of voyagers to a ritual where fire didn't just light the way it scoured cities clean. In ancient Persia, the annual Noh festival culminated in the Chahashan Suri, a bonfire leap that purified communities as the new year dawned. Families gathered in public squares, their faces glowing in the firelight as they tossed bundles of dried herbs into the flames, each crackle carrying away grudges and misfortunes. The boldest sprinted over the embers, their laughter mixing with the scent of burning rue and wild lavender. This was more than spectacle. It was a collective exhalation, a fiery rebirth for both people and land. The genius of Chahashan Suri lay in its layered symbolism. The fires represented the sun's triumph over winter's darkness, while the act of jumping always from right foot to left mirrored the Zoroastrian concept of crossing into spiritual renewal. Even the ashes held meaning. Families swept them into pots to bury at crossroads, a physical release of negativity. Modern archaeologists have found traces of these rituals in Persepolis ruins, charred seeds, and melted copper amulets, proof of ceremonies spanning millennia. Today, as Iranians worldwide still gather for this Red Wednesday, the flames burn brighter than ever, a defiant light against forgetting. What connects these two rituals, the ocean chant and the fire leap, is their shared understanding of the elements as guides. For Polynesians, water and stars were the map. For Persians, fire was the purifier. Both remind us that the most profound navigation isn't about reaching a destination, but about aligning with the forces that shape our journey. The thin mountain air burned with the scent of burning coca leaves as the chosen child, dressed in fine vicuña wool, took her first steps toward the summit. This was the Capacocha, the Inca Empire's most sacred offering, not of gold or corn, but of living children believed to bridge the human and divine. Selected for their unblemished beauty and noble bloodlines, these children spent months traveling across the empire, feasting and receiving blessings before their final ascent. Archaeologists studying the frozen mummies on Andean peaks have uncovered heartbreaking details. A girl's braid still tied with colorful cords, a boy's cheeks stained with traces of chicha maize beer, their stomachs holding last meals of elite delicacies like llama meat and spicy peppers. These weren't hasty executions, but meticulously planned spiritual journeys. What makes the Capacocha extraordinary is its underlying cosmology. The Incas saw their empire as a living body, with Cusco at its heart and sacred peaks as vital organs. By placing these perfect children called Kuhari Warmi, embodying both masculine and feminine energies, on mountaintops, they maintained the empire's equilibrium. Modern ice core samples reveal the ceremonies coincided with droughts or volcanic eruptions, suggesting the sacrifices were cosmic maintenance. The children's frozen remains, preserved like porcelain by the high-altitude cold, tell silent stories. One 6-year-old girl, now known as Juanita, wore a shawl pinned with silver figurines, her expression serene, as if she'd simply fallen asleep in the thin air. Forensic analysis shows many were given ayahuasca or coca beforehand, easing their transition into what the Incas called a beautiful sleep with the gods. The ritual's true complexity emerges in its aftermath. These children weren't forgotten martyrs, they became mountain guardians. Villagers would make pilgrimages to nearby peaks, leaving miniature figurines and shells as offerings to their spiritual protectors. Spanish chroniclers wrote of locals whispering to the summits during storms, begging the enchanted ones for mercy. Today, Quechua elders still speak of apus, mountain spirits, who occasionally appear as radiant children to lost shepherds. Now we turn from frozen peaks to a ritual where movement itself became prayer. In the ceremonial plazas of the Aztec capital, priests performed the Mitotilistli, a dance so precise its geometric patterns were said to pull the sun across the sky. Dressed in iridescent quetzal feather regalia, their ankle rattles hissing like serpents, they spun in concentric circles that mirrored celestial orbits. This wasn't performance, it was gravitational theology in motion where every step sustained cosmic order. When the dancers' shadows aligned perfectly at noon, the crowd would erupt. The gods had signaled their approval. Modern reconstructions reveal the dance's hidden genius. The footwork's rhythm matched human heart rates at peak exertion, inducing trance states that made the divine feel palpably near. What connected these two rituals, the still sacrifice and the ecstatic dance, was their shared conviction that human actions could shape reality itself. Whether through a child's silent ascent or a priest's whirling steps, the boundary between earth and heaven wasn't fixed, but endlessly negotiated through sacred acts. The Incas froze moments of perfection in ice. The Aztecs spun them into being with every beat of the drum. Both understood what we often forget. That ritual isn't about symbolism, but participation in the ongoing creation of the world. The drums erupt like thunder as a towering figure emerges from the temple smoke, his body completely shrouded in cascading layers of indigo and crimson fabric, his wooden mask gleaming with cowrie shells that click like ancestral teeth. This is the Egungun, the living embodiment of Yoruba forebears returned to walk among their descendants. In a whirl of color and motion, the dancer becomes something more than human, his every step channeling generations of wisdom. The crowd parts in reverence as he sweeps through the village square, his trailing robes stirring up dust that seems to glow in the afternoon sun. Children shrink back when he pauses before them, only to burst into laughter as he playfully shakes his beaded sleeves, proof that even the dead remember joy. What makes these festivals extraordinary is their delicate balance of awe and intimacy. The Egungun's costumes aren't just disguises, they're sacred architecture. Layers of hand-dyed Aso oak cloth represent the many realms of existence, while the masks often carved from Iroko wood, the tree of life, are believed to temporarily house ancestral spirits. Modern spectrographic analysis of the drums reveals something astonishing. Their complex polyrhythms mirror the brainwave patterns of deep meditation, explaining why the music so easily induces trance states. When the Egungun speaks, his voice distorted through a hidden gourd resonator. It's not theater, it's divination. Elders listen closely for coded messages about crop rotations, marital disputes, or warnings of impending misfortune. The rituals unfold with precision. Before dawn, the chosen dancer undergoes purification in a stream, his body rubbed with Effun chalk to signify neutrality, a blank slate for the ancestor's voice. The masks themselves are stored in secret shrines, wrapped in white cloth and fed offerings of palm oil and kola nuts. During performances, attendants called Atoku flank the Egungun, not just to support the heavy costume, but to prevent overzealous spectators from touching the sacred fabrics. One tug at the wrong moment, legend says, could sever the spirit's connection mid-message. Yet for all its solemnity, the festival pulses with life. Market stalls overflow with akara bean cakes and peppered snails, while competing drum ensembles drive dancers into ever-frenzied motions. Contemporary adaptations blend tradition with innovation. Some Egungun now incorporate LED lights into their costumes, their electric glow weaving modern technology into ancient practice. In Lagos University, students organize Egungun Awareness Weeks, using the imagery to spark dialogues about cultural preservation. The true power of these rituals lies in their continuity. When a grandmother whispers to her granddaughter that the twirling blue Egungun is her great-uncle returned, she's not just telling a story, she's knitting the past into the present's fabric. In a world where ancestry is often reduced to DNA percentages, the Yoruba remind us that the dead never truly leave. They simply change form, returning when we need them most, clothed in raucous color and the heartbeat of drums. Now we turn from these vibrant reunions to a ritual where communion with the departed required not masks but mirrors. In the shadowed crypts of medieval Europe, scryers would gaze into polished obsidian discs, believing the volcanic glass could reflect not just faces, but the whispers of those who'd crossed the veil. The quietest rebellion against life's greatest inevitability unfolds not with struggle, but with serene surrender. In Jainism's most contemplative ritual, Salakana devotees facing terminal illness or extreme old age voluntarily relinquish food and water, embracing death as the ultimate act of spiritual refinement. Picture an elder seated on a simple straw mat, their frail body wrapped in unstitched white cloth, surrounded by monks chanting hymns that dissolve fear like sugar in water. Each day, their intake diminishes, first abandoning grains, then fruits, finally sips of water, until the body, freed from earthly attachments, releases the soul like a bird from an open cage. This isn't despair, it's meticulous alchemy, transforming mortality into liberation. What makes Salakana extraordinary is its philosophical underpinnings. For Jains, every life, from microbes in water to insects in soil, is sacred. A natural death risks unintended violence. A single breath might draw in organisms. A stumble could crush ants. By consciously withdrawing from sustenance, practitioners minimize harm while maximizing mindfulness. Historical accounts describe participants radiating eerie tranquility, their final days spent reciting mantras, forgiving debts, gifting possessions, even plucking gray hairs to avoid attracting lice. Modern scholars liken it to a reverse birth. As the body lightens, the soul sheds karmic layers accumulated over lifetimes, yet this ritual ignites fierce ethical debates. Critics argue it resembles suicide. Defenders counter that suicide stems from anguish, while Salakana requires years of preparation and monastic approval. In India, courts have oscillated between banning and protecting it under religious freedom. Contemporary Jains navigate these tensions carefully. Some opt for modified versions, fasting only until natural death arrives. The ritual's true lesson may lie in its radical invitation to meet death not as an enemy, but as a teacher whose final exam is letting go. Now we turn from this ultimate surrender to a ritual where movement itself became sacred. Among the whirling dervishes of Turkey, every spin was a step closer to divine union. The Hippodrome of Constantinople erupted in a deafening roar as 40,000 voices shook the marble stands, all eyes fixed on the charioteers rounding the final turn. But this was no ordinary race. The blues and greens weren't just sports teams. They were cosmic proxies in a living ritual where every lap thundered with divine significance. When the emperor took his seat in the Cathedrals, the royal box draped in purple silks, his presence transformed the spectacle into a sacred drama. The four-horse chariots, their wheels painted celestial blue or earth green, weren't merely competing for victory. They were reenacting the eternal struggle between sky and land, order and chaos. Even the dust rising from the track held meaning. Poets wrote of it as the breath of angels stirred by the gods' invisible hands. What made these races extraordinary was their layered symbolism. The factions, blues representing the heavens and greens embodying earthly fertility, dated back to Rome's ancient circus factions, but Byzantium elevated them to theological theater. Charioteers wore tunics embroidered with stars or vines, their horses' manes dyed to match. The spina, the central divider around which they raced, was studded with obelisks and statues of Apollo, turning each circuit into a miniature cosmic journey. Modern excavations reveal how meticulously orchestrated this was. Starting gates aligned with solstice sunrises, victory crowns woven from herbs sacred to Demeter. The crowd's chants weren't cheers but hymns when green supporters shouted, "Nika, victory." They were invoking not just their team but the goddess Nike's blessing on the harvest. Yet the ritual's true power lay in its volatility. These races were pressure valves for imperial tensions. In 532, a dispute over a contested finish ignited the Nika revolt. Fires raged for days, half the city burned, and Emperor Justinian nearly fled before his general Belisarius slaughtered 30,000 rioters in the hippodrome. The bloodshed wasn't just political. It reflected the terrifying belief that unbalanced cosmic forces could unravel society. Afterward, races incorporated new rituals. Charioteers now circled the track 7 times before competing, echoing the 7 days of creation, while spectators received blessed bread to temper passions. The faction's legacy lingers in surprising places. Modern soccer ultras choreographed displays and derby rivalries echo Byzantine fan culture, while political analysts compare the blues and greens to polarized party systems. But perhaps the most poignant relic is the hippodrome's surviving obelisk, its base carved with images of emperors presiding over races, a silent witness to when sport wasn't entertainment, but a fragile prayer for harmony between heaven and earth. Now we turn from the thunder of hooves to a ritual where wood and paint weren't just materials but portals. Among the Quackwa-Kawa people of the Pacific Northwest, cedar masks didn't depict spirits, they became them. When a dancer pulled the strings of a hamatsa mask during winter ceremonies, its long beak would snap open, revealing not carved wood but living flesh, the performer having transformed into the raven spirit before the audience's widening eyes. This wasn't theater, it was metamorphosis in motion. The mask's power lay in their construction. Each was hollowed from a single red cedar log, its grain carefully followed to suggest the spirit's form. Paint mixed with salmon eggs gave the colors a luminous quality in firelight, while hidden mechanisms allowed faces to split open, revealing secondary masks beneath. But the true magic happened in performance. Dancers trained for years to sync their movements with the mask's transformations. A slow turn might reveal a human face becoming a wolf, while a sudden jerk of the head could make an eagle's wings seem to beat. Anthropologists studying these rituals discovered something astonishing. The masks often represented animals crucial to local ecosystems: ravens, bears, orcas, suggesting the ceremonies reinforced conservation values. When a dancer embodied the salmon spirit, he wasn't just entertaining. He was reminding the tribe of their covenant with the natural world. Today, museum conservators use CT scans to study these masks without disturbing their sacred integrity, revealing layers of meaning even the carvers might not have consciously intended. What makes these rituals timeless is how they dissolve boundaries. A Quackwa-Kawa elder once told an ethnographer, "The mask doesn't hide your face, it reveals your soul." In that moment of transformation, dancer and spirit, human and animal, past and present became one. Not so different, perhaps, from Byzantine charioteers channeling gods. Both rituals reminding us that the most sacred acts often live in the space between what is and what could be. Now we turn from these living masks to a ritual where silence spoke louder than any chant. In the cliffside tombs of the Moch civilization, rulers weren't buried alone. They were entombed with ceramic flutes, their hollow chambers waiting to sing the stories of the dead. The ground trembles beneath bare feet as 30 warriors slam their thighs in perfect unison, their eyes wide with primal focus, voices erupting in a guttural chant that seems to shake the very air. This is the haka, not merely a dance but a living tempest of ancestral power. Every muscle flex, every thunderous stomp, every rolled tongue and bared tooth carries centuries of Maori tradition, a visceral bridge between the living and their warrior forebears. Originally called the Peru, these dances were performed before battle to invoke the strength of tribal gods like Tumatoanga, the deity of war. Warriors would coat themselves in shark liver oil to make their skin glisten under the sun, their synchronized movements designed to unsettle enemies before a single spear was thrown. Historical accounts describe opposing forces fleeing at the mere sight of a haka's opening movements, its psychological warfare as sharp as any blade. What makes the haka extraordinary is how it fuses art with ontology. The lyrics, or kupu, aren't just words, they're genealogical incantations. A single line might reference the creator god Tain separating earth and sky, or a tribe's migration across the Pacific in waka canoes. The pukana, the fierce widening of eyes, isn't theatrical. It's meant to expose the whites of the eyes as a challenge, mimicking the stare of the Taniwa, mythical water guardians. Even the rhythmic chest slapping serves a purpose. The percussive sound mimics the heartbeat of Papatuanuku, the Earth Mother, grounding performers in shared ancestry. Modern motion capture studies reveal the dancer's biomechanical genius. The angular arm movements maximize visual impact, while the deep knee bends generate seismic vibrations detectable 50 feet away. Today's haka has transcended its martial roots without losing potency. New Zealand's All Blacks rugby team performs Ka-Mate, a haka composed in the early 19th century by Chief Te Roparaha after he hid from enemies in a Kumara pit. Global audiences marvel at its intensity, but few grasp its layers. The upward thrusting hands symbolize the speaker emerging into sunlight. The repeated phrase, Ka-Mate, Ka-Mate, I die, giving way to Ka-Ora, Ka-Ora, I live, mirrors the cycle of conflict and survival. Contemporary adaptations include hakas for weddings, graduations, and even political protests, their forms evolving while retaining the core wakapapa, the unbroken connection to lineage. The true power of the haka lies in its duality. It's both weapon and welcome, challenge and celebration. When Maori schoolchildren learn its motions, they aren't just memorizing steps, they're shouldering the weight of generations. That primal roar we hear today, it's the same voice that once echoed across battlefields, now reminding the world that some rituals don't fade. They evolve, they adapt, but their fire never dies. Now we turn from the electrifying presence of the haka to a ritual where the departed weren't silenced, but given voice. In the cliffside tombs of the Moche civilization, rulers were buried with ceramic flutes, each carefully tuned instrument waiting to sing the stories of the dead when future hands would lift them to the light. The streets of Babylon pulsed with an almost electric energy as the crowds pressed forward, their sandals kicking up dust along the processional way. This was the Akitu festival, 12 days where the entire cosmos seemed to reset, and the fragile order of civilization hung in the balance. At its heart lay a drama more gripping than any temple hymn, the god Marduk's battle against the primordial dragon Tiamat, a mythic showdown reenacted with such intensity that the fate of the kingdom depended on its outcome. But the rituals weren't just pageantry, they were a high-stakes negotiation between heaven and earth, where the king's very legitimacy could be won or lost in the span of hours. Day 4 was the moment that turned everything upside down. The high priest would stride into the throne room, strip the king of his scepter and crown, and strike him across the face, a shocking act of ritual humiliation. The monarch would then kneel before the statue of Marduk, reciting a haunting confession. I have not sinned, O Lord of the lands, nor neglected your divinity. This wasn't empty theater. Cuneiform tablets reveal that kings who failed to show proper humility during this ordeal could face real rebellions, as if the gods themselves had withdrawn their favor. The slap echoed beyond the palace walls. In that moment, every citizen from aristocrat to potter understood that no power was absolute under heaven. Then came the turning point. On the fifth day, the king's crown was restored, but only after Marduk's statue approved it through divination. Priests would scrutinize the entrails of sacrificed lambs, searching for favorable markings in the liver's lobes. If the signs aligned, the king would lead a procession to the Akitu house outside the city walls, symbolizing Marduk's journey to battle chaos. The tension was palpable. One broken wheel on the god's chariot, one stumble in the ritual choreography, and the entire new year could be cursed. The festival's climax was pure catharsis. As torches blazed against the night, priests reenacted Marduk's victory over Tiamat with clashing cymbals and roaring crowds. The king, now reaffirmed as the god's earthly regent, would receive the Tablet of Destinies, a clay replica granting him authority to decree the year's fates. Modern scholars spot echoes of this in everything from Jewish Rosh Hashanah to Christian Easter, but the Akitu's true genius was its psychological alchemy. By embodying the myth, Babylonians didn't just recount their creation story, they relived it year after year, forging collective resilience against life's inevitable chaos. Now we turn from the roaring crowds of Babylon to a ritual where absence spoke louder than presence. In the hushed chambers of Egyptian temples, the daily ceremony known as opening the mouth required not chants or offerings, but perfect silence, a void where the divine could finally be heard. The razor-sharp tanto glinted in the candlelight as the disgraced samurai knelt on the white silk cloth, his face as composed as if he were preparing for tea ceremony rather than his own death. This was seppuku, the ritualized suicide that turned personal disgrace into a final act of agency, a paradox where self-destruction became the ultimate assertion of control. The ceremony's precision was staggering. The samurai would dress in immaculate white robes symbolizing purity, compose a death poem with brush and inkstone, and select a trusted second, the kaishakunin, to stand ready with a katana. When the moment came, he would plunge the short blade left to right across his abdomen, the excruciating cut representing the release of his true spirit from earthly failure. The kaishakunin's role was both merciful and symbolic. A perfectly timed decapitation left just a strip of flesh attaching head to body, demonstrating the warrior's unwavering resolve even in death. What makes seppuku extraordinary is how it transformed violence into philosophy. The act wasn't about pain, but about demonstrating that a samurai's will could master even the most primal instinct, self-preservation. Historical accounts describe astonishing composure. 47 Ronin calmly eating farewell meals before avenging their lord in 1703, or General Nogi sitting in perfect Caesar after the Russo-Japanese War, his final letter expressing regret for outliving his emperor. Even the aesthetics held meaning. The choice of white kimono mirrored funeral shrouds, while the folded cloth beneath the tanto prevented dishonorable bloodstains on the tatami. Modern forensic studies of surviving seppuku knives reveal chilling details. Some blades were deliberately dulled to prolong suffering as ultimate proof of endurance. Yet seppuku's legacy is fraught with contradictions. While Western observers often fixated on its brutality, Japanese texts emphasize its spiritual dimensions the way it mirrored the Buddhist concept of mujo impermanence and Shinto ideals of purity. Some scholars argue it functioned as societal pressure valve, allowing failed leaders to atone without dragging families into lasting infamy. Today, traces linger in unexpected places, corporate apologies that echo the ritual's formal structure, or martial arts dojos where students still learn the proper angle for holding a tanto not for use, but as a meditation on accountability. Now we turn from the stark finality of seppuku to a ritual where the unconscious mind shaped empires. Among the Iroquois Confederacy, dream interpretation wasn't just personal guidance, it was constitutional law, with entire villages reorganizing based on the nocturnal visions of their dreamers. The stone court at Chichen Itza echoes with phantom cheers as you stand between its towering walls, the ancient scoring rings still hanging impossibly high above. This was the Mayan ball game, a ritual so much more than sport, where players didn't just compete for glory, but reenacted the very battle between life and death itself. Imagine the scene: teams clad in padded cotton armor, their hips wrapped in protective belts of woven hemp, launching a solid rubber ball, weighing as much as a modern bowling ball, using only their thighs and elbows. The ball's thunderous bounce would have reverberated like celestial drums, its movement mirroring the sun's perilous journey across the sky. What makes this ritual extraordinary is how it blurred the line between game and cosmology. The court itself was a microcosm of the universe, its flat surface representing the earthly plane, the side walls sloping upward like the vault of heaven. When players struck the ball through those stone rings, they weren't just scoring points. They were symbolically recreating the moment the hero twins Hanapu and Xbalanque outwitted the lords of the underworld in the Popol Vuh, the Mayan creation epic. Some glyphs suggest the captain of the winning team would present his own blood in ceremony afterward, while the losers, well, their fate remains debated. Spanish chroniclers wrote of sacrificial decapitations, and carvings at El Tajan show a player kneeling beside a blade-wielding priest. But recent archaeology hints at a more complex truth: skulls found near courts often belong to honored warriors, suggesting some losers may have volunteered for the ultimate honor. The game's physicality defies belief. Modern athletes attempting reconstructions struggle with the ball's weight. It could reportedly fracture bones if mishandled. Players wore stone yokes around their waists to absorb impact, while the ball's composition held sacred significance. Made from the sap of the rubber tree, a plant associated with blood sacrifice, its bounce symbolized the heartbeat of the earth. Some courts, like Capans, were built over underground rivers, so the ball's movement echoed the water's hidden flow, a reminder that every game was a dialogue with the gods. Today, echoes of the ritual survive in surprising ways. In rural Guatemala, a descendant game called Ulama still uses hip strikes, though the stakes are mercifully lower. Meanwhile, astrophysicists note the court's alignments track Venus's cycles, proof the Maya wove astronomy into every aspect of life. When you stand in that silent court now, listening to the wind whistle through the scoring rings, you're not just hearing ghosts of athletes, you're hearing the whisper of a civilization that turned sport into a prayer. Now we turn from the thunder of the ball court to a ritual where the ocean wasn't just a setting, but a living god. For the Polynesian navigators who braved the Pacific's endless blue, every voyage began with a ceremony that blurred the boundary between sailor and sea. The crisp Nordic air filled with the iron scent of blood as the chieftain raised his ceremonial knife above the thrashing white stallion, its coat glistening with sweat despite the winter chill. This was the blot, the Norse sacrificial rite where the boundary between mortal and divine grew thin enough to taste. Far from the barbaric caricatures of popular lore, these rituals followed precise sacred theater. The chosen animal, often a prized horse or ox, was paraded before the community, its hide ceremonially cleansed with birch twigs before the killing stroke. As life left its body, the gathered villagers would lean forward, catching the steaming blood in ritual bowls. This wasn't waste, it was liquid blessing. Priests flicked the blood onto altars, idols, and even the worshippers themselves with bundles of fir branches, anointing all present with the sacred force they called H-Laut. What made the blot extraordinary was its communal alchemy. The sacrifice wasn't complete until the meat was cooked and shared in a feast where even the poorest received a portion. Historical accounts like Ibn Fadlan's describe Viking chieftains ensuring every attendee, from warriors to thralls, ate the consecrated flesh, forging a tangible connection to the gods and each other. The bones, carefully unbroken, were hung in sacred groves or buried in bogs as offerings. Archaeologists still find these bog butter deposits today, the marrow mixed with herbs like juniper as preservatives and symbolic purifiers. Seasonal timing layered additional meaning. Autumn blots celebrated the harvest and prepared for winter's trials, while spring sacrifices welcomed renewal, often involving eggs and dairy to honor fertility gods like Freyja. The darker aspects of blot rituals, human sacrifices mentioned in sagas like the temple at Uppsala, were likely rare and reserved for extreme crises like famine or war. Recent forensic studies of bog bodies suggest these victims weren't random captives but willing participants, their last meals laced with hallucinogenic henbane or alcohol to ease the transition. A skeleton discovered in Denmark wore a rope necklace tied with a ritual knot, its positioning indicating the wearer may have fastened it themselves before the hanging. Today's Ancestral revivals strip away the sensationalism while preserving the ritual's core. Modern practitioners substitute mead for blood in sprinkling ceremonies and use donated livestock meat for feasts, ensuring no animal dies solely for ritual. The focus remains on what the Vikings cherished most: the sacred act of sharing. At Iceland's annual Thorablot, families still gather for fermented shark and lamb soups, reciting verses from the Havamal about hospitality and cosmic balance. The essence endures, not in the blade's edge, but in the bonds forged around the fire afterward, where stories of gods and ancestors remind us that the divine lives not above, but between us. Now we turn from the communal feasts of the north to a ritual where fire didn't just symbolize purification, it scoured cities clean. The ancient Zoroastrians of Persia practiced a breathtaking ceremony called Nowruz, where entire communities leaped over roaring bonfires to burn away misfortune as the new year dawned. Flames climbed skyward like bridges to the divine, their light a defiant answer to the winter's darkness. The dimly lit room hums with a sound older than words as the Sufi circle begins to move, first a sway, then a pulse, then an entire revolution of bodies turning in perfect sync with the chant. This is Zikr, the remembrance, where the rhythmic repetition of Allah's 99 names becomes a gateway to divine ecstasy. The leader's voice rises above the others, calling out, Allah. Allah, Allah, each syllable stretching like molten gold, while the participants' breath and footsteps merge into a single living current. Some tilt their heads back as if drinking moonlight, others press palms to chests where the words vibrate deepest. This isn't prayer as petition, it's prayer as immersion, where language dissolves into pure sensation. What makes Zikr extraordinary is its physiological alchemy. The chanting follows precise breath patterns, inhaling on La No, exhaling on Ilaha deity, but culminating in the explosive release of Ilah Allah, except God. Neuroscience studies reveal why this works. The cadence synchronizes heartbeats among participants, while the repetitive motion induces theta brainwaves, the same state achieved in deep meditation. The whirling often associated with Sufism isn't mere dance, it's sacred geometry in motion, the spinning skirts tracing orbits that mirror planets circling the sun. Historical accounts describe Zikr ceremonies lasting entire nights, where participants would reach states of wajd, ecstatic trances so intense they'd faint or levitate. The 13th century poet Rumi wrote of these moments, "The drumbeat of La ilaha illa Allah is the pulse that moves the stars." Modern practitioners still chase this transcendence. In Istanbul's Galata Mevlevihanesi, the air thickens with the scent of rose oil as dervishes whirl, their right hands turned upward to receive grace, left hands down to channel it earthward. Yet Zika's true power lies in its accessibility. Unlike rituals requiring elaborate tools or temples, this one needs only breath and intention. Syrian refugees in camps have been documented performing Zika with nothing but stones to mark their circle, their chants weaving resilience from thin air. The ritual's endurance proves a profound truth, that the divine might be summoned not through complexity, but through the relentless, rhythmic surrender to a single sacred phrase. Now we turn from the spinning heart of Sufi devotion to a ritual where fire didn't just symbolize purification, it became the very voice of the gods, deep in the temples of Mesoamerica. The hills of ancient Ireland blazed against the autumn darkness as communities gathered around roaring Samhain bonfires, the air thick with the scent of burning hawthorn and the murmured names of ancestors. This wasn't just a seasonal marker, it was a night when the veil between worlds frayed to transparency, when the dead were said to walk among the living, their breaths mingling with the smoke. Imagine the scene, farmers driving livestock between twin fires to purify them, their hides steaming as embers spiraled upward like reverse rain. Children carved turnips into grotesque faces, not for decoration, but as makeshift lanterns to frighten away restless spirits. And in the flickering light, young women peeled apples in a single strip, tossing the skins over their shoulders to divine their future husband's initials, a practice that echoes in today's Halloween games. What made Samhain extraordinary was its duality, a festival equally steeped in reverence and terror. The Celts saw this as a liminal time when chaos threatened the natural order. Costumes weren't whimsical but functional, disguising oneself as a ghoul confused malevolent spirits who might otherwise recognize human prey. Archaeologists have found pits filled with animal bones and broken weapons from this period, suggesting offerings to appease the other world. Yet alongside the fear ran currents of celebration. Feasts featured apples and nuts, symbols of wisdom and fertility, while communal storytelling preserved genealogies as vividly as any written record. The bonfires themselves were more than beacons. Their ashes were scattered over fields the next morning, a tangible blessing for the winter ahead. Modern Halloween carries these echoes in unexpected ways. The jack-o'-lantern's grinning face descends from Celtic warding traditions, while trick-or-treating mirrors the medieval, souling practice where the poor offered prayers for the dead in exchange for food. Even the thrill of haunted houses taps into that ancient tension between fear and fascination. But perhaps Samhain's deepest legacy is its acknowledgement of darkness as part of life's cycle, not something to conquer, but to negotiate with year after year. Now we turn from the crackling energy of Samhain to a ritual where silence wasn't just broken, it was sculpted. In the cliffside tombs of the Moche civilization, rulers were buried with ceramic flutes, their hollow chambers waiting for living breath to sing the stories of the dead. These weren't mere grave goods, they were instruments of resurrection, crafted to channel voices across the threshold of eternity. When archaeologists first discovered these flutes in Peru's arid valleys, they assumed they'd find simple whistles. Instead, they unearthed complex Antares multi-chambered pipes tuned to pentatonic scales, their notes still piercingly clear after 1,500 years. The genius lay in their construction. Each flute was shaped like a mythical creature, a jaguar, a condor, or even a decapitated warrior, with sound holes positioned to transform breath into animal cries or human wails. Modern musicians attempting reconstructions describe an eerie phenomenon. Played in the confined space of a tomb replica, the notes create standing waves that make flames dance in precise patterns. The Moche likely understood this acoustic magic, using the flutes in ceremonies where music didn't just accompany ritual, it became the ritual. Most haunting are the fingerprints sometimes found pressed into the clay before firing. These weren't mass-produced items but personal relics, perhaps shaped by the very hands they would someday mourn. When a living musician played the flute of a long-dead noble, the vibrations resonated through shared material, clay from the same riverbanks, pigments from the same earth. In that moment, the boundary between past and present thinned as palpably as the veil during Samhain. The flutes whisper a truth both cultures understood, that the dead never truly leave us. They linger in the songs we breathe into old instruments, in the stories we tell by firelight, in the costumes we wear to both honor and evade them. Whether through Celtic bonfires or Andean melodies, these rituals remind us that memory is the most powerful magic of all. The pre-dawn mist clings to the Ganges like a shroud as an Aghori sad, who crouches in the smoldering ashes of a funeral pyre, his matted locks caked with sacred ash, his fingers cradling a human skull filled with river water. This isn't madness, it's Mahavrata, the great vow, a ritual so radical it strips existence to its barest bones. These ascetics don't just meditate on death, they dine beside it, using cremation grounds as their dining halls and skeletons as their teachers. Their practices sleeping atop corpses, smearing their bodies with pyre ashes, even consuming morsels of flesh from the dead aren't acts of horror, but of transcendence. For the Aghori, the line between sacred and profane doesn't exist. By embracing what society recoils from, they shatter illusion itself. What makes their rituals extraordinary is their philosophical foundation. The skull bowl, or kapala, symbolizes the ultimate truth. Beneath skin and status, we're all equal in death. When an Aghori drinks from it, he's not desecrating the dead but honoring the impermanence of all things. Their signature ash, vibhuti, comes from funeral pyres, a constant reminder that the body is just borrowed matter. Even their most controversial act, eating partially cremated flesh, stems from the belief that taboo breaking purifies the mind. Modern anthropologists note parallels with cognitive behavioral therapy. By willingly confronting what terrifies us, we disarm its power, but the Aghori's true challenge is to perception itself. Their appearance, naked or clad in rotting cloth, adorned with bones, mirrors Shiva's Bhairava form, the destroyer of ignorance. When they smear themselves with excrement or meditate atop corpses, they're enacting a radical truth: disgust is learned, not inherent. Aghori lore tells of gurus who could transform decay into perfume, or make rotting food taste like ambrosia, metaphors for seeing the divine in all things. Today, genuine Aghoris are vanishingly rare. Most holy men demanding money from tourists are imposters exploiting the tradition's shock value, yet the ritual's essence endures in unexpected ways. Neuroscientists studying Aghori meditation techniques find their brainwaves shift into gamma synchrony, the same state observed in advanced Tibetan monks. Their practices, once dismissed as grotesque, now intrigue psychologists for their power to rewire fear responses. The Aghori's greatest lesson isn't in their extremes, but in their question: what if enlightenment lies not in avoiding life's horrors, but in staring them down until they blink? Now we turn from the ashes of cremation grounds to a ritual where movement itself became sacred geometry. Among the Navajo people, the night chant ceremony unfolds over 9 days, its sand paintings and dances mapping the cosmos underfoot. Dancers tracing constellations with their feet, healers singing illness into harmony. This is medicine not just for bodies, but for the soul of the world. Deep in the heart of the African savanna, the air hums with the rhythmic beat of drums as a line of teenagers, their bodies painted with sacred white clay, step forward to face the knife. This is the moment they've spent months preparing for: the cutting of the skin, the permanent scars that will tell the world they've crossed the threshold into adulthood. Among the Bantu peoples, from the Xhosa of South Africa to the Makonde of Tanzania, coming-of-age rituals weren't just ceremonies. They were visceral classrooms where pain, endurance, and community became the curriculum. The scars themselves were more than marks, they were living language. Each pattern held meaning. A series of raised dots on a young man's chest might signify his lineage, while the intricate chevrons carved into a woman's abdomen could symbolize fertility and strength. The cutting tools, iron blades forged by smiths who doubled as spiritual intermediaries, were never sterile in the modern sense, but they were sanctified. Elders would anoint them with herbal pastes, whispering prayers to ancestors as they worked. The pain wasn't incidental, it was the point. By enduring it, initiates proved their readiness to shoulder adult responsibilities. Modern anthropologists studying these rituals note something fascinating. The scars often mimic natural patterns found in the environment, like the bark of the baobab tree or the tracks of a serpent, binding the wearer to the land itself. But the physical trials were just one layer. In many Bantu communities, initiates would spend weeks or even months in secluded bush camps, a total withdrawal from familiar comforts. Boys learned to hunt with handmade spears, their hunger sharpening their focus. Girls studied herbal medicine and the art of storytelling, their voices growing steady under the stars. The isolation wasn't punishment, it was a sacred decompression chamber, allowing the old child's self to dissolve so the new adult could emerge. Some cultures took this further. The Okik of Kenya required initiates to live alone in the forest for a full cycle of the moon, their only companions the spirits whispered about in fireside tales. What's remarkable is how these rituals adapted to modernity without losing their core. In urban Cape Town, Xhosa boys still undertake the Olwaluko, their initiation schools now sometimes held in township backyards rather than remote hillsides, but the essence remains. Elders fret over globalization's erosion of tradition, but the persistence of these rites proves their resilience. When a young Sotho woman in Johannesburg proudly displays her Labolo leg scars beneath her business suit, she's not just honoring the past, she's carrying its wisdom into boardrooms and city streets. The true power of these rituals lies in their communal alchemy. An initiation wasn't complete until the entire village witnessed the transformation. The moment a young man returned from the bush, his family would burn his childhood belongings, a literal and symbolic clearing of the past. Girls returning from seclusion were greeted with new names, their old identities shed like snake skin. The entire community reinvested in each initiate's success because their growth was the tribe's growth. Now we turn from the scars that mark time's passage to a ritual where faces themselves became fluid. Among the Bamana people of Mali, masquerades weren't performances, they were portals. When a dancer donned the heavy wooden mask of the Chihuahua antelope, he didn't just portray the creature, he channeled its spirit, his movements becoming a prayer for fertile fields and abundant harvests. The mask's towering horns, sometimes stretching 6 feet skyward, weren't decoration. They were lightning rods for divine energy. The first light of spring stretches across Iran as families gather around Haft-Sin tables, their surfaces shimmering with 7 symbolic items, each starting with the Persian letter Sin, a vibrant tapestry of rebirth and renewal. This is Nowruz, a 3,000-year-old celebration where fire leaps, seeds sprout, and the past and future clasp hands across a threshold of blooming hyacinths. Picture the scene, children in crisp new clothes jumping over small bonfires in parks, their laughter rising with the sparks as they chant, Sokai-e to Asman, Zadi Iman Astu, give me your vibrant red, take back my wintry pallor. Meanwhile, grandmothers arrange sprouted wheatgrass beside flickering candles, its tender green shoots symbolizing the stubborn persistence of life even in the harshest soil. What makes Noh as extraordinary is how it intertwines natural cycles with human hope. The Haft Sin table isn't just decoration, it's a microcosm of the universe. Garlic represents health, apples embody beauty, vinegar signifies patience, and sumac berries mirror the sunrise's crimson. A goldfish glides in a bowl, its movements echoing the flowing vitality of the new year, while a mirror reflects both the present moment and the infinite possibilities ahead. Historians trace these symbols back to Zoroastrian traditions, where fire temples celebrated the triumph of light over darkness. Yet Nowruz transcends any single faith. Kurds, Azeris, and Tajiks all embrace variations of these rituals, united by shared history older than borders. The festival's climax comes with the precise moment of the vernal equinox, when day and night hang in perfect balance. Families crowd around televisions or smartphones, waiting for the exact second spring begins, then erupt in cheers, exchanging kisses and coins for prosperity. For 13 days, no one works disputes. Instead, they visit each other's homes, tasting pastries like baklava dusted with pistachios, their sweetness a promise of the year to come. The final day, Sizda Badar, sees entire cities empty into parks and countryside, where they picnic beside streams and toss their sprouted greens into running water, a symbolic release of burdens into nature's care. Nowruz's true magic lies in its resilience. Despite revolutions, invasions, and modernization, these rituals endure, from Tehran's bustling streets to Los Angeles diaspora communities. When Afghan refugees in Germany arrange Haft Sin tables with makeshift substitutes, or when Iranian students in Sydney jump over candle flames instead of bonfires, they're not just preserving tradition, they're proving that some roots cannot be severed. The festival's universal themes, renewal, reconciliation, the triumph of light, speak a language older than nations. Now we turn from the vibrant fires of Nowruz to a ritual where the sleeping mind held unparalleled power. Among the Iroquois Confederacy, dreams weren't merely nightly visions, they were sacred directives capable of reshaping entire villages. Warriors might abandon planned raids, families relocate their longhouses, or councils reverse decisions, all because a dreamer's vision demanded it. This wasn't superstition, it was a sophisticated system of collective psychology, where the unconscious guided the conscious with the force of law. The still waters of a hidden Egyptian grotto shimmer under flickering torchlight as the initiate kneels, his linen tunic clinging to his skin. This isn't the baptism you know, no crowded riverbanks, no public declarations of faith. The Gnostic immersion rite was something far more intimate, a whispered secret between the seeker and the divine. As the priest pours water over the crouching figure, it isn't sin that's being washed away, it's ignorance. The liquid becomes a key, unlocking the dormant spark of the divine trapped within human flesh. The Nag Hammadi codices, those leather-bound volumes buried for 16 centuries in the desert sands, describe it vividly. The water of life is hidden in the living water. To the Gnostics, this wasn't metaphor, it was alchemy. What set these rites apart was their radical inversion of traditional theology. Where mainstream Christianity saw baptism as cleansing corruption, Gnostics believed it revealed an eternal truth, that the soul wasn't fallen but merely asleep, its divine origin forgotten. The Gospel of Philip, one of the suppressed texts rediscovered in 1945, compares the ritual to dyeing cloth. The water does not purify the body, but the soul takes color from it. Some ceremonies incorporated oils infused with myrrh and cassia, their fragrances representing the perfume of the beyond. Others used mirrors submerged in the baptismal basin, so initiates saw their reflections ripple and distort, a visceral lesson that earthly identity was an illusion. The ritual's secrecy wasn't just precaution, it was theological necessity. Gnostics believed the material world was a flawed creation, ruled by a lesser god they called the demiurge. True enlightenment came through gnosis, not intellectual knowledge, but transcendent experience. A surviving Coptic manual describes initiates being blindfolded, then led through a series of challenges where they had to identify sacred objects by touch alone: a carved dove, a braided cord, a clay lamp, each representing stages of spiritual awakening. The final test, drinking from a cup of bitter wine mixed with salt, embodying the painful yet necessary journey toward self-knowledge. Modern scholars studying these rites notice uncanny parallels. The blindfolded trials resemble contemporary sensory deprivation therapy, while the emphasis on inner divinity echoes modern mindfulness practices. Even the Gnostic creation myth, where divine sparks fall into material existence, reads like a poetic precursor to quantum physics' concept of energy trapped in matter. When a 3rd century Gnostic teacher wrote, "The kingdom of God is inside you and outside you," they might as well have been describing the holographic universe theory. Now we turn from these secretive waters to a ritual where the ocean wasn't just a setting, but a living, breathing god. For the Polynesian wayfinders, the sea wasn't something to conquer. It was Tangaroa, the great ancestor, whose moods could be read in the dance of currents and the song of waves. Their canoe launch ceremonies. The air crackles with laughter and the sharp scent of roasting soybeans as children scramble across tatami mats, pelting a masked figure with handfuls of golden kernels. This is Setsuban, Japan's raucous spring purification ritual where demons get evicted not with solemn prayers, but with a volley of edible ammunition. On the eve of the Lunar New Year, households transform into battlegrounds against misfortune, with roasted soybeans becoming both weapon and blessing. The masked Oni demon, often a parent or neighbor in a terrifying papier-mâché mask, cowers as the family chants, "Oni wa soto, fuku wa achai," demons out. Luck in, each thrown bean symbolically driving away negativity. But there's deeper magic in this chaos. The beans aren't just projectiles, they're vessels of life force, roasted to destroy any lurking impurity, then eaten in a number matching one's age +1, an edible shield against future harm. What makes Setsuban extraordinary is how it collapses sacred and playful into a single moment. The ritual likely began in Heian-era court ceremonies, where aristocrats used beans to exorcise plague spirits. Over centuries, it absorbed Buddhist elements like the custom of facing the year's lucky direction while eating beans, and Shinto traditions of tossing them at home shrines to awaken dormant kami. Modern variations reveal delightful adaptations. Some supermarkets sell pre-robbed beans with tiny Oni figurines, while temples host celebrity-led bean tosses where crowds scramble for packets containing gold-painted soybeans promising extra fortune. In Kyoto's Yoshida Shrine, priests ignite massive bonfires of old charms during Setsuban, the bean throwing merging with flames to create a double purification. Yet the ritual's genius lies in its physicality. Unlike passive prayers, Setsuban demands action. The sting of beans against skin, the crunch between teeth, the collective shout shaking the house. Neuroscientists note how such multisensory rituals enhance memory. Children who grow up hurling beans at demons internalize resilience as something they can literally grasp and throw. When a grandfather carefully counts out 79 beans for his granddaughter, one for her years, plus one for growth, he's not just passing on tradition, he's teaching that warding off darkness can taste delicious. Now we turn from the playful bombardment of beans to a ritual where fire didn't just cleanse homes, it scoured entire cities. In ancient Persia, The Chahashan Suri festival culminated in streets lined with bonfires, their leaping flames swallowing the past year's regrets in a single, glorious conflagration. The drumbeats begin before dawn, echoing through the Bandiagara escarpment like the heartbeat of the earth itself. As the first golden light spills over Molly's cliffs, the Dogon elders emerge in masks so vast they seem to scrape the sky, each one a swirling constellation of carved wood and sacred fibers, representing ancestral spirits and celestial beings. This is the Sigwi ceremony, a ritual so rare most witness it only once in their lives, timed to the precise 60-year orbit of Sirius B, a star invisible to the naked eye yet central to Dogon cosmology. The dancers' movements aren't just performance, they're living astronomy, their footwork tracing the elliptical path of this hidden companion star around Sirius, knowledge passed down through generations long before telescopes confirmed its existence. What makes Sigwi extraordinary is how it weaves cosmic precision with communal catharsis. The masks themselves are marvels of engineering, some towering over 10 feet tall, their intricate designs encoding myths of the universe's birth. The Yasajan mask, shaped like a primordial serpent, undulates as its wearer sways, symbolizing the creative force that coiled through the void before time began. Dancers wear heavy wooden stilts called kanoga, their rhythmic stomping shaking the ground like celestial tremors. For 7 years leading up to the ceremony, secret societies craft new masks from the sacred hogon tree, their creation as ritualized as the dance itself. Elders whisper that the wood must be cut during a waning moon to absorb the cosmos' descending energy, but Sigwi's true brilliance lies in its democratization of the divine. While initiates guard esoteric knowledge about Sirius' binary system, the entire village participates in the public dances, children clapping to mimic meteor showers, women ululating to represent cosmic vibrations. Modern astrophysicists remain baffled by how the Dogon mapped Sirius B's density and orbit without optical aids. Some attribute it to ancient contact with advanced civilizations. Others see it as proof that meticulous observation of night skies over millennia can reveal truth science later verifies. The ritual's climax offers a clue. As dancers spiral into formation mimicking atomic particles, they enact the Dogon belief that macrocosm and microcosm mirror each other, that the same patterns governing stars also pulse within our cells. Today, as younger Dogon navigate a globalized world, Sigwi adapts without dilution. Mobile phones now capture the dances, but the mask's sacred symbols remain encrypted. Only certain elders fully understand their geometric language. When the next Sigwi dawns in the 21st century's twilight, it won't just commemorate the past, it'll recalibrate the future, proving that some truths don't just belong to history, they orbit beyond time. From fire ceremonies to celestial dances, these 40 rituals reveal something profound about the human spirit, our endless creativity in the face of life's biggest questions. Whether it was the Zoroastrians tending eternal flames as conduits to the divine or the Dogon dancers mapping invisible stars with their footsteps, our ancestors turned ordinary materials, clay, cloth, bone, into bridges between worlds. What's astonishing isn't just the diversity of these practices, but the shared yearning they all express. A child's handprint on a Mach flute, the precise angle of a no-actor's mask, the tremble in a Scythian warrior's voice as he swore a blood oath. Each ritual was an attempt to grasp the intangible, to find order in chaos, to whisper back to the universe. The echoes of these traditions are everywhere if you know where to look. That cozy feeling you get lighting candles on a birthday cake, it's a distant cousin of Beltane's purifying fires. The mindfulness apps guiding your breathing, they're digital descendants of the Essenes' silent vigils. Even modern science owes a debt to these ancient observers, the Dogon's knowledge of Sirius B, the Mayan ballgame's celestial geometry, the Dream Temple's early understanding of subconscious healing. Our ancestors didn't just perform rituals, they engineered spiritual technologies using rhythm, symbol, and movement to hack into deeper layers of reality. Yet these practices weren't just about individual enlightenment, they bound communities together. The Viking Blot feasts, the Hawaiian Makahiki Games, the Yoruba Egungun festivals, all transformed strangers into kin through shared awe. In a world where loneliness is an epidemic, there's wisdom in remembering how a well-crafted ritual can turn isolation into belonging, whether through collective dance, synchronized chanting, or simply passing a cup of tea with deliberate grace. So which ritual spoke to you? Was it the quiet courage of the Jain Salakana, the explosive joy of Setsuban's bean throwing, or maybe the Polynesian navigator's starlit chants? Let us know in the comments. We're endlessly curious about how these ancient sparks still ignite imaginations today. And if you've enjoyed this journey through humanity's hidden ceremonies, hit that subscribe button to join us as we keep unraveling history's most captivating mysteries. Until next time, remember, every time you pause to mark a moment, whether with a whispered wish, a raised glass, or a deep breath at sunrise, you're adding your own stitch to the vast tapestry of human ritual. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and most of all, keep honoring those quiet acts of meaning that make us who